The dreaded, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. Well, that's a very confusing statement. And you're probably thinking, okay, what does that mean? How does that even make sense? And what am I supposed to do with that information? So in this video, I want to decode what that actually means. And I'm going to show you the key mistakes, the key wrong responses that I want you to avoid, and the key things you need to do to respond to this properly. And if you want to see more content that cuts through a lot of the BS and really bad advice that you get about marriages and relationships that exist out there, and if you want content that gives you the exact thing you need to help you reconcile and create that dream relationship, then subscribe to this channel and click the bell button as well to be notified when I post new videos every single week. So to understand what this means, we need to understand the interplay between emotions and logic. And we need to understand that falling in love is a very emotional thing, not a logical thing. And so, this is why you see, for example, people falling in love with really bad people who are logically not the best person to be with. Or it also explains why people decide to leave relationships when logically and logistically it makes sense to stay. For their kids, for example, financially, etc. So when you look at this statement right here, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. The first part of that statement is really the logical statement. That's the I love you part. But I'm not in love with you. That's the emotional part. And so when you're asking yourself, okay, what does this even mean? How does that even make sense? Basically, you should be looking at the second part, the second portion of this, the part where she says, I'm not in love with you anymore. That's the emotional part, and that's what is guiding her decisions. So the one thing you don't want to do to respond to this is by appealing to logic even more, which is what a lot of men tend to do. So to understand why this logical approach is not going to work, we need to understand how emotions work, how emotions form in the first place. So you have an emotion here, but the emotion doesn't form because of some event happening. So a lot of people think like some event happens and an emotion occurs. But it's really that an event happens, that event filters through our existing paradigms. Our existing paradigms or beliefs about the world create a reflexive interpretation, and it's the interpretation that creates the emotion. And we know this to be true because if you put 100 people in the exact same room, looking at the exact same thing, so the same event, they will have wildly different emotions because of their wildly different beliefs about life, about the world, that leads to the wildly different interpretations, etc. So once we understand this flow, we understand why the logical approach doesn't really work. And the best example I can give here is, imagine you are faced with a depressed person who's depressed. Have you ever tried trying to logically convince a depressed person to not feel depressed? Logically convince them, for example, that life is good, there's nothing wrong right now, you should be happy. Does it work? It doesn't. In fact, sometimes you telling the depressed person about how great life is may make them even more depressed. Because what happens is, when you're telling them logically that life is great, you're trying to change the event here. But you have no control over how that person interprets you telling them that life is great because you are in no control of what their paradigms are. And so you could be telling them life is great, but if their paradigms about the world leads them to interpret that as, oh my gosh, you know what? Life is good, and the fact that I'm depressed makes me even more depressed because now I feel guilty for being depressed. If that's the interpretation they make, then that's going to create worse emotions. And the same is happening with your partner right now. So her emotions right now is that she doesn't feel the love for you anymore. So the emotions here are negative, and these emotions are bred from a lot of negative interpretations due to a lot of negative paradigms and beliefs she has about you, about the relationship, etc. And so even if you try to logically convince her to stay, for example, that this relationship is not that bad, maybe. Maybe you convince her by getting angry at her for wanting to leave and wanting to betray you like that. Or maybe you play the aloof role and say, you know what? I've listened to some YouTube videos that tell me like the most powerful position you can be in is to walk away and mean it. So I'm just gonna walk away and mean it. So you could try all these tactics, but if her paradigms about you is already negative, then she will most likely interpret whatever actions you take in a negative way anyway. That creates even more negative emotions. And this is why a lot of people are finding themselves in this cycle where they find their partners pulling away. They try all these tactics, it doesn't work, it actually pushes them away even more, and they double down on the tactics whenever it doesn't work, and it puts them in this very, very bad and negative cycle in their marriage. And so there are three very common reasons that I see of how people try to logically convince their partner to stay. The first approach is what we call the active approach. That is when, again, you get angry at your partner. You basically punish and scold your partner for even wanting to leave in the first place. And the intention here is to instill some fear, instill some guilt, enough guilt to increase the cost of her leaving. But if you look at this flow chart again of how emotions form, again, what you're doing is you are trying to change the event. You're trying to add more guilt there. But if she already has a negative paradigm about the relationship, about you, her interpretation to that event, to you getting angry at her, for example, may be that, you know what, my goodness, I'm so glad I'm leaving now. This actually confirms my decision to leave. That even creates worse emotions. So you can see how that logical approach doesn't really work. So let's say you try the second approach here, which is what we call the stoic approach, which is when you give your partner a lot of reasons of why leaving maybe is a bad idea, or why staying is a good idea. Maybe you convince them that, hey, you're going to be leaving the kids, it's not really good for the kids, etc. Again, if your partner already has a negative paradigm about you, the most likely interpretations you're going to have is, you know what, I'm so sick of this person making me feel guilty for feeling the way I feel, for wanting to do the things I do. You know what, next time I'm just not going to tell this person about what I'm going to do, about what I think, about what I feel, because he's going to just tell me how I'm wrong anyway. So I'm just going to leave. So that actually creates more bad emotions. So you can see how, again, this stoic approach doesn't really work. Now you can also try the passive approach where you just simply walk away pretending like you mean it. But again, if your partner has negative paradigms about you, what will happen? Her interpretations of that well-intended action will be interpreted in a negative way anyway. And that will create more bad emotions and so on. So none of this approach, the active, stoic, or passive approach, will ever work. It's never worked for any of my clients. In fact, it usually backfires on you because of the way emotions work in the first place. So then, okay, if us trying to appeal to the logic doesn't really make sense, doesn't really work, in fact, it backfires, then how do we appeal to our partner's emotions? Well, the first mindset shift that I need you to make is to learn what it means to play the long game and play in the right scoreboard in a way. So if you look at this flowchart again, you don't want to play in the event portion here. You want to play in the paradigm portion. You want to change your partner's paradigms, her beliefs, her fundamental subconscious beliefs even about you, about the relationship. And you have to understand that changing these paradigms is a long game. It takes my clients at least 6 months, and that's if they do it perfectly for 6 months. So if you look at a lot of my client stories, that trust and that changing of beliefs from their partner's side really takes 9, sometimes to 18 months to do. And you have to begin by accepting that there is nothing you can do in the short term to change the weather. Those paradigms are very deeply entrenched. And whenever you try to use some tactics to try to change that paradigms immediately, you are not actually changing the paradigms. You are trying to change the event. You're trying to give her some logical arguments of why she should change her beliefs. That doesn't work that way. Which is why in my program, we have this script called the Treating the Hemorrhage script. And it's a script that we teach our clients pretty early on in the program because it needs to be said pretty early on in the program. And a TTH script can sound something like, hey partner, I totally understand why. I totally hear you saying that you don't have any feelings for this relationship anymore. And you know what, at this time, I'm not actually going to say anything to guilt trip you, to convince you to stay, or try to play some manipulative games to try to guilt trip you into staying. And it's not that I don't care about this relationship, it's not that I don't care about you, but it's really because I realized that in the past, like whenever you express your desires to me, you express something that you want to do, you express your feelings to me, I would panic and I would try so hard to manipulate you, to basically convince you to stay and convince you that your feelings are wrong. So I'm not going to do that anymore. I want to finally respect and admire and take in and understand what you're feeling instead of just talking back to it. So that's a script where, logically speaking, it sounds like the worst thing you can say. It's basically saying, you want to leave, then please go. And here's my intention for wanting to understand why you want to go. Logically, that makes no sense. But emotionally, as you're hearing that, a lot of you can probably feel like this is a very different response, a very different reaction than what your partner would be expecting. And that's the kinds of things that you can say to really begin to reverse, to starve the paradigms that lead her to distrust you, and to feed some of the stuff that makes her go, maybe this guy is changing. Maybe this is different. Maybe this could be different, etc. So that's just one of the scripts that you can use among the many that you can use in our program to really help you appeal to emotions better. And the effectiveness of this TTH script really starts to make more sense when you understand the second point, which is understanding the undercurrents of whatever it is that you say. So we need to understand here that for everything you consciously say, you're also saying something subconsciously. So for example, if you say to yourself that I want this outcome, I want to be rich, I want to reconcile, for example, you're also saying I am not rich, I am not reconciled. As soon as you say I want something, you consciously say I want something, you automatically create the subconscious of the opposite. Now this starts to play out even further when you start to consider that emotional feelings of love is really a falling outcome, not a striving outcome. And so they call it falling in love for a reason. And when it comes to falling outcomes, it's actually these undercurrents that are more important of a message than what you consciously say. So for example, if you talk about falling asleep, which is another falling outcome, if you tell yourself, I want to fall asleep, you consciously tell yourself, I want to fall asleep, you are automatically saying subconsciously that you are having a hard time and you're not falling asleep. And so when you do this, when you keep consciously trying to tell yourself that I want to fall asleep, the less you can fall asleep because subconsciously, again, you're telling yourself you are not falling asleep, you cannot fall asleep. And again, when it comes to falling outcomes, the subconscious undercurrents are more important. And it's also interestingly why a lot of people cannot ever get out of their addictions to smoking, to drugs, etc. Because a lot of the methods that we have around removing addictions is a striving method, where you tell yourself, for example, okay, you're gonna tell yourself and remind yourself every day to not smoke, don't smoke, don't smoke, don't take drugs, or whatever it is. And you have to maybe keep a daily journal of how many days you don't smoke. But whenever you say, don't smoke, you're also subconsciously saying, I want to smoke. You're reminding yourself that you want to smoke, which is why when I kicked out my smoking habit of 14, I've been smoking since I was 14, guys. And I kicked out that habit only when I stopped trying to think about it. I approach it with a falling approach that it start to work. And so the same thing with your partner here. So you're consciously here telling her to come back. You are naturally going to create the undercurrent, the subconscious undercurrent that reminds her of all the reasons why she doesn't want to come back, she shouldn't come back, etc. That's another reason why the logical approach doesn't really work. And this is a very extremely mind-bending concept, I think, for a lot of you, because I don't see a lot of videos talking about this, but it's such a crucial topic that is the reason why a lot of my clients before joining the program would struggle. No matter what they do, they will struggle to create the outcome they want, to create the falling outcome they want. And once they understand how the right process to actually create a falling outcome by appealing to their emotions and the undercurrents, that's when everything changes for them. So back to the script that I gave you earlier, where consciously I'm saying things that doesn't really make sense in that it doesn't really get you logically to the outcome that you want. But think about the subconscious undercurrents that I create when I say those things. And that's why that script is so effective. And it's through appealing to the undercurrent, the subconscious undercurrents, constantly. That's how you appeal to someone's emotions, and that's how you change these paradigms slowly but surely. And this brings me to my third step, which is that you need to be able to execute the right what in the right how and with the right why as well. So, there's a reason why I rarely in my videos talk about scripts or tactics or here's what you should do and say. But in this video I did, but out of a lot of fear, because when I tell you the tactics, the TTH script, for example, a lot of you are going to obsess about that what and just run with it. But we need to understand that if you are saying the TTH script, which can sound great, we can be very powerful. So you're saying the right what, but with the wrong how and with the wrong what, it will have a potential to backfire hard on you. So please just don't go and use that script and just start to say it to your wife without knowing the how and the why behind it. And I talked about the importance of the why and the how in my previous video, where we talk about the circles of trust and the 3 key ingredients needed for everything you say and do to sound a lot more genuine. So I won't belabor that point too much because it's mentioned in the previous video, but if you want to watch that video, you can click the link above my head and also down below this video as well. And the last step is really to learn the value of backing up your actions with real identity shifts, real performer's mastery. Because what you need to understand about appealing to the undercurrents, appealing to emotions, is that it's not something that you can fake. So if you look at the circles of trust again, you have the what here. The what can be faked. The what you say and do can be faked. But the how, your subtle micros, your subtle microtones, your subtle micro expressions, your subtle word choices, that's really hard to fake. And having the right micros over a long period of time consistently, that's also really hard to fake. And having the right why, the right intentions behind it, is also very hard to fake. The internal stuff are very hard to fake. But in order for you to appeal properly to the undercurrents, you need to have the harmony, the perfect harmony of the what, how, and why. So this is why in our program we focus so much on internal shifts, because the internal shifts are really us getting to why, the right why. And when you have the right why, you will naturally have the right how and the right what as well. The same way, if I approach any sales interaction, any conversation, or business, or parenting with the right intention, naturally, I will know what the right how to do it is, how the right what to do it is, naturally. Now, this is very different to the approach that I think a lot of you want to take, which is that you just want me or videos or people to tell you, here's what you should do and say. But again, guys, just remember this. You can understand the right what to do and say. But if the what to do and say only appeals to the conscious part, it's a striving approach, and it's naturally creating that negative subtext, the negative undercurrent, the subconscious undercurrent. You are basically falling for the same trap that so many of my clients have fallen into, that I'm trying to get you out of in this video, and you're falling right to that trap. So please don't do that. And this is a change that might take 6, 12, 18 months for you to master. But again, guys, think about it in the big picture of your life here. Let's say you spend 18 months learning how to speak to emotions, learning how to speak effectively to the undercurrents, the subconscious undercurrents. What is 18 months for a lifetime of blissful relationships in your marriage, as a parent, in your business, with your colleagues, with your family? Isn't it worth it? And so if you want to understand how to make the right internal shifts and have the right skills to be able to speak effectively to these undercurrents, you can join me in a masterclass on the 5 proven steps to rebuilding your relationships from the ground up. In that masterclass, I'll show you the exact process that all my clients go through to master this stuff themselves, to take them from very dire situations to where they are today. So if you want to join me in the masterclass, click the link above my head or also down below this video. In the meantime, hope that was helpful for you guys. I'll see you in the next video.